2 years after humanity walked away from the Council, the Kreth War finally ended. It did not end because the Council won some great military victory. It did not end because the Kreth suddenly decided to stop their invasion. It ended because humanity, despite everything that had happened, decided to act. But they did it on their own terms. When the Kreth fleet advanced toward the Zentari homeworld, something unexpected happened. The planet was home to 4 billion civilians. Most military analysts predicted total destruction. The Council forces had already been pushed back. There was no way to evacuate everyone. It looked like a massacre was inevitable. Then a human fleet appeared out of nowhere. They were not official military vessels. They were not sent by the Earth government. They were volunteers, private citizens who had made a choice. Captain Peter Morris commanded a civilian transport fleet that evacuated 3 million Zentari refugees before the Kreth forces arrived. His ships made trip after trip, working around the clock, refusing to leave anyone behind. Dr. Henry Shaw returned to Zentari Prime despite the danger. He went back to finish the work on the blight cure. He worked day and night in a laboratory while battles raged in orbit above. He completed the protein restructuring research. His cure saved billions of Zentari from starvation. He did this not because the Council asked him to. He did it because he remembered his friend Dr. Krelmar. He did it because it was the right thing to do. Commander Jake Patterson led what he called a private security force. These were former military personnel who volunteered to help. They held defensive lines long enough for Council species to evacuate a dozen different worlds. They fought with skill and courage. They saved millions of lives. They did not do it for glory. They did not do it for the Council. They did it because innocent people needed help. The humans who volunteered had a saying. We are not doing this for the Council. We are doing this because this is who we are. The Council can think whatever they want about us. But we know who we are. We help people who need help. That is what makes us human. The Kreth War changed everything. The Council had survived, but just barely. Their authority was shattered. Their reputation was destroyed. Their certainty about their own superiority was completely gone. And in the ruins of their pride, a new understanding slowly began to emerge. 5 years after humanity's departure, Ambassador John Miller found himself in a very different setting. He was sitting in a small cafe on a human colony world called New Haven. The colony had grown quickly. It was now a thriving community of both humans and aliens who had chosen to leave Council space. They had built something new together, something based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. Across the table from Miller sat someone he never expected to see again. It was Vex Theron, but this was a very different Vex Theron. The former Council speaker had been removed from power after the war. His people had blamed him for the disaster. Now he was just a private citizen. He had requested this meeting. Miller had almost refused, but curiosity won out. Vex Theron spoke first. His voice was quiet and lacked all the arrogance it once held. We were fools. Complete and utter fools. We looked at your species and saw only your youth. We mistook that youth for weakness. We saw your compassion and your willingness to help others. We mistook that for softness. We saw your insistence on maintaining independence. We mistook that for arrogance. We were wrong about everything. Miller sipped his coffee. He did not rush to respond. He let the silence stretch out for a moment. And now what do you see now? Vex Theron's posture showed something Miller had learned meant deep shame in his species. Now we see the truth. Humanity did not need the Galactic Council. The Council needed humanity. You brought something we had lost in our ancient civilizations. You brought innovation and fresh thinking. You brought adaptability. You brought the willingness to try new approaches to old problems. Most importantly, you brought hope. You showed us that things could change and improve. We had forgotten that was even possible. Miller set down his cup. So what happens now? Why did you request this meeting? That is entirely up to you and your people, Vex Theron replied. The Council has been completely reformed. New leadership, new rules, new attitudes. We would like to invite humanity to be part of a new federation, but this time you would be founding members, true equals, not junior partners, not applicants seeking approval, equal partners in building something better. Miller was quiet for a long time. He looked out the window at the street below. Humans and aliens walked together. They ran businesses together. They lived as neighbors. But it was happening here in human space on human terms. It was happening because both sides had chosen it freely. Finally, Miller spoke. It is not my decision to make anymore. I am retired now. That choice will be up to our government and our people. They will have to debate it. They will have to vote on it. That is how we do things. But if it were your decision? Vextheron asked. What would you choose? Miller thought carefully before answering. I would say that trust must be earned. You had our trust once. You had our friendship. You had our respect. And you threw all of it away because you could not see past your own prejudices. Getting those things back will not be quick. It will not be easy. It will take years of proving that things have really changed. Words are cheap. Actions matter, we understand. Vextheron said with genuine humility. We are prepared to wait. We are prepared to prove ourselves. However long it takes, we know we must earn back what we lost through our own foolishness. Miller nodded slowly. Then maybe someday we can try again, but if we do, we will do it right this time. Real partnership. Real equality. Real respect. Nothing less will be acceptable. Across human space, the debate that Miller predicted did indeed rage. Town halls filled with passionate voices on both sides. Some people wanted nothing to do with the council ever again. The wounds were too fresh. The betrayal was too deep. They argued that humanity should focus on building their own civilization, completely separate from the old powers. Others saw opportunity in the new Federation proposal. They pointed out that isolation had its own dangers. They argued that humanity could be a force for positive change in galactic civilization. They could help reform corrupt systems. They could bring their values of equality and innovation to a wider stage. But everyone agreed on one fundamental thing. Humanity would never again be dismissed, never again be underestimated, never again accept being treated as inferior. The days of asking for permission to be taken seriously were over. Forever, Dr. Krelmar sent a message to Dr. Henry Shaw. The Zentari scientist had just won the highest scientific prize in the galaxy for his work on the blight cure. But in his acceptance speech, he made it very clear that the breakthrough would never have been possible without Shaw's partnership and teaching. He used his moment of glory to publicly acknowledge humanity's contributions. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. Commander Patterson's volunteer security force had become famous across the galaxy. Their tactics and strategies were now taught at military academies everywhere. The new Federation Defense Fleet was being organized using the principles they had demonstrated. Decentralized command, flexible response, cooperation instead of rigid hierarchy. These were all human ideas that were now spreading throughout galactic civilization. Captain Morris had written a book about the civilian evacuation operations during the Kreth War. His procedures were now standard. Emergency protocols on 400 different worlds. He had shown that ordinary citizens, when properly organized and motivated, could accomplish extraordinary things. This too was a very human idea that was changing how others thought about disaster response. 10 years after walking away from the council chamber, humanity stood in a very different position. New Haven Station, built exactly halfway between human territory and former council space, had become the new center of galactic civilization. It was neutral ground where all species met as equals. The Galactic Council had learned its lesson the hard way. They had discovered that sometimes the quietest departure makes the loudest statement. They had learned that sometimes you do not know what you have until it walks away. Most importantly, they had learned that respect cannot be demanded or legislated. It must be earned through actions and maintained through integrity. Humanity had not set out to teach the galaxy a lesson. They had simply refused to accept being treated as less than they were worth. They had walked away with dignity when denied respect. And in doing so, they had proven their worth far more effectively than any argument or demonstration ever could have. The question of whether humanity would rejoin galactic civilization remained open. Negotiations continued. Trust was slowly being rebuilt, but this time it was happening between equals. This time it was built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. This time it might actually last. Only time would tell if both sides had learned enough from their mistakes to build something better. But for now, humanity stood tall among the stars, respected not because they had demanded it, but because they had earned it by having the courage to walk away when respect was denied. 18 months had passed since humanity's departure from council space. Now the galaxy was burning. The Kreth Empire had been quiet for decades. They were a hostile force that everyone feared, but nobody had seen take action in a very long time. But the Kreth had been watching. They had been waiting, and when they saw how weak the Council had become, they struck. Kreth battle fleets poured across the border like a dark wave. They overwhelmed system after system. The Council's defenses should have held. Those systems had been protected by a sophisticated defense network. But that network had been designed and maintained by human engineers. When the humans left, they took all the access codes. They took all the technical documentation. Nobody else knew how to make the system work properly. In the council chamber, panic had replaced the usual orderly proceedings. Representatives shouted at each other. Screens showed maps where red enemy markers kept advancing. The Corthan ambassador was nearly hysterical. Where are the defensive platforms? Sector 7 has completely fallen. We have lost 3 entire colonies in 2 days. A technician tried to explain the problem. The platforms are still there, Ambassador, but they are not coordinating with each other. The central control network is not functioning. How is that even possible? The ambassador demanded. We built redundant systems. We have backup controls. The technician looked uncomfortable. The network was maintained by human engineers, sir. When they departed, they took the master codes and all the maintenance documentation. Our technicians have been trying to reverse engineer the system. But it is extremely complex. We simply do not understand how all the pieces fit together. Speaker Vexatheron roared in frustration. This is unacceptable. Activate the backup systems immediately. Use whatever resources are necessary. The technician's voice was barely a whisper. The backup systems were also designed by humans, Speaker. We face the same problem with those. The chamber fell into shocked silence. The full scope of their dependency on humanity was becoming crystal clear, and it was happening at the worst possible moment. In the middle of this crisis, a single human vessel appeared at the edge of Council space. It was a diplomatic courier ship called Hope's Messenger. The ship requested permission to dock at Council Central Station. After a brief debate, permission was granted. The Council members were desperate. Maybe, just maybe, the humans had come to help. Ambassador John Miller walked into the Council chamber. He looked older now. The isolation and stress of the past 18 months showed on his face. But he walked with dignity and purpose. This time he was not coming as a supplicant begging for acceptance. He was coming as an observer, an equal, perhaps even as someone the Council needed more than he needed them. Miller did not waste time with pleasantries. Humanity has received information about the Kreth invasion. We have come here to make our position absolutely clear. This conflict is not our fight. This is not our problem to solve. Vexatheron's voice cracked with a mixture of fury and desperation. Not your fight? The Kreth threaten the entire galactic community. They threaten civilization itself. How can you say this is not your concern? Miller replied with perfect calm. This is a community that declared humanity inadequate. A community that said our contributions were negligible. A community that forced us to choose between surrender and departure. We chose departure. You made it very clear we did not belong. Surely you do not need help from such an inadequate species. Councillor Threndak spoke up. His voice was heavy with regret. We may have been too hasty in our initial assessment. Perhaps humanity's contributions were more significant than we properly recognized at the time. Miller raised one eyebrow. Perhaps your defense grid is failing across multiple sectors. Your trade networks have collapsed. Your agricultural systems are in crisis. Your medical facilities cannot handle basic disease outbreaks. It is rather interesting how quickly negligible becomes completely irreplaceable. Vexatheron swallowed his pride enough to ask the question that everyone was thinking. What does humanity want? We can offer credits, technology, territory. Name your price for assisting us in this crisis. Miller shook his head slowly. We want nothing that you can offer, Speaker. Humanity has moved forward. We are establishing new colonies in unclaimed space. We are building our own networks and our own defense systems. We are doing quite well without the Council. Better than well, actually. We are thriving, then why come here at all? Vexatheron asked with confusion and bitterness in his voice. Miller's expression became very serious. To deliver a message. Not from my government. This is from me personally. I spent 20 years of my life working for galactic unity. I believed deeply in the Council's stated ideals. I thought we were building something important together. And when you cast humanity aside based on prejudice and pride, You broke something that cannot be easily repaired. You did not just reject our membership. You rejected everything we had contributed, everything we had built together. You threw away decades of cooperation and friendship. He turned to leave the chamber. Then he paused and looked back. Oh, and one more thing you should understand. If the Kreth forces reach human space, we will defend ourselves. We have the capability to do so. But Council territory? That is your problem to solve. You made it very clear that humans do not belong in your galactic community. We are simply respecting that decision. The chamber erupted into chaos as Miller walked out. Some council members shouted for his arrest. Others called for immediate negotiations. A few sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the full magnitude of their mistake. Back on Earth, President Greg Palmer watched a recording of Miller's speech to the council. His cabinet sat around the table. Nobody spoke for a long moment after the recording ended. Secretary of Defense Karen Foster finally broke the silence. Ambassador Miller did not have authorization to take that position, sir. We have not made any official decision about whether to assist the council. Greg nodded. I know. But his message accurately reflects how most of humanity feels right now. The council hurt us. They rejected us. And now they want our help only because they are in trouble. That is not the foundation for any kind of healthy relationship. Secretary of State Michelle Torres looked troubled. I understand that sentiment, sir. But we are talking about billions of lives. The Kreth do not take prisoners. They do not show mercy. If the council falls, countless innocent civilians will die. Greg stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the city below. I know. That is what makes this decision so difficult. We have every right to refuse. We have every reason to let the council face the consequences of their choices. But is that who we want to be as a species? Do we want to be the people who stood by and watched genocide because our pride was hurt? The room fell silent again. Everyone knew the president was wrestling with one of the hardest decisions a leader could face. Justice said to let the council pay for their mistakes. But mercy said that innocent people should not suffer for their leader's arrogance. Where did the balance point lie between those two principles? Finally, Greg turned back to his cabinet. Start organizing volunteer forces. Not official military. Private citizens who choose to help. Make it very clear that this is not a government operation. Anyone who goes does so by their own choice. And make absolutely certain the council understands that if we do help, it changes nothing about our independence. We are not coming back. We are not rejoining their club. We are simply choosing to do what is right. Karen smiled slightly. I know plenty of people who will volunteer for that, sir. Starting with me. 1 full year had passed since humanity left council space. The problems were no longer small. They were impossible to ignore. The Vrelniks Confederation felt the impact first and worst. Their huge mining operations in the Outer Reach sector had always depended on safety systems designed by humans. When a plasma conduit failed on mining platform 7, the Vrelniks engineers made a terrible discovery. They did not actually understand how the human safety systems worked. They had just been using them without really learning how they functioned. The explosion killed 53 miners. It was a disaster. More importantly, it was the first clear sign that humanity's contributions had been far more important than anyone realized. Councillor Threndax of the Vrelniks stood before his fellow council members. His gills were flushed with embarrassment. He had to admit a painful truth. We may have been too quick in our judgment. The human safety protocols were much more sophisticated than we understood. We thought we could simply replicate them. We were wrong. Speaker Vexatheron tried to dismiss the problem. This is just a minor setback. Surely your engineers can figure out how to compensate for the loss, but they could not. That was the problem. The Vrelniks engineers tried for months. They could not recreate what the humans had built. It was not just the technology itself. It was the way humans thought about problems. It was their approach to solving complex issues. That was what made the difference. Within a few more months, similar problems appeared everywhere across council space. The Korthan discovered that their crop yields were dropping steadily. They had relied on human agricultural consultants who understood pollination patterns. Without those experts, their farms were producing less food each season. The Zentari blight continued to spread unchecked across their southern continent. Dr. Krelmar and his team tried desperately to complete the work that Dr. Henry Shaw had started, but they could not understand his notes. They could not figure out his approach to the problem. The protein restructuring method was too complex. Millions of Zentari faced potential starvation. Medical facilities across dozens of worlds struggled with diseases that human doctors had treated routinely. The treatments existed. The medicines existed, but the knowledge of exactly how and when to use them was missing. That knowledge had walked out the door with the human medical staff. Trade routes that had seemed perfectly efficient suddenly made no sense at all. Ships were taking longer to deliver goods. Costs were going up. Profits were going down. Nobody could understand why this was happening. Then someone finally realized the truth. Human logistics coordinators had been quietly optimizing these routes for years. They had been making small adjustments constantly. Nobody had paid attention because everything just worked smoothly. Now those humans were gone, and the whole system was falling apart. On Earth, President Greg Palmer sat in a secure briefing room. He was meeting with his top advisors. Intelligence reports covered the table in front of them. The reports all told the same story. The Council was in serious trouble. Secretary of Defense Karen Foster summarized the situation. They are beginning to understand the scope of their mistake. Our intelligence indicates the Council is in full crisis mode. Economic output is down across the board. Several member species are experiencing food shortages. There have been industrial accidents on at least a dozen worlds. The President asked the obvious question. Have there been any attempts to contact us? Secretary of State Michelle Torres nodded. Several unofficial channels have reached out. The messages are all very carefully worded. They avoid admitting any mistakes. Instead, they talk about wanting to open dialogue and explore areas of mutual interest. The President understood immediately. In other words, they want us to come back and fix their problems, but they do not want to apologize. They do not want to admit they were wrong, and they certainly do not want to offer us the equal partnership we asked for in the first place. Michelle confirmed this assessment. That is exactly correct, sir. Greg leaned back in his chair. He thought carefully before speaking. What is the status of our colony program? Karen smiled as she answered. Project Exodus is actually ahead of schedule. The first colony ships launched last week. We have identified 47 habitable star systems outside Council territory. Every single one of them is unclaimed. Every single one of them is rich in valuable resources. We will be completely independent within 2 years. And what about our defense capabilities? The President asked. If the Council decides to make demands backed by military force, what position are we in? The defense grid is fully operational. Karen's smile grew wider. Our new weapon systems are installed and tested. If the Council tries to use force against us, they will get a very unpleasant surprise. We are not the primitive species they think we are. Greg nodded slowly. He understood what this meant. Humanity had learned a critical lesson during their time with the Council. Never depend on others for survival. Never trust others to respect you if you cannot defend yourself. Never let anyone else control your destiny. Meanwhile, back in Council space, the situation continued to deteriorate. The Council held emergency session after emergency session, but they could not agree on solutions. Some members wanted to swallow their pride and formally invite humanity back. Others refused to admit any mistakes had been made. A few even suggested using military force to make humans return and fix the problems. Councillor Threndax tried to make his colleagues see reason. We must face facts. Our declaration that human contributions were negligible was completely wrong. Humans were not just participants in our society. They were essential to how everything functioned. We need to admit this mistake and make proper amends. Speaker Vextheron refused to accept this view. We cannot show such weakness. If we admit we were wrong, every species in the galaxy will question our authority. We will find other solutions. We will adapt. We do not need humans, but the evidence said otherwise. Every week brought new problems. Every month showed the Council falling further behind. Production dropped. Innovation stopped. Progress ground to a halt. The Great Galactic Council, which had seemed so powerful and advanced, was slowly collapsing without the humans they had rejected. On Zentari Prime, Dr. Krelmar stood in his laboratory. He looked at the data screen showing the blight spreading across his world. He thought about his friend Dr. Henry Shaw. He thought about all the human researchers who had worked alongside Zentari scientists. He had taken them for granted. Everyone had. They had not appreciated what humans brought to their collaborations. Now it was too late. The council had made a choice based on pride and prejudice. They had looked at humanity's youth and seen weakness. They had looked at humanity's military independence and seen threat. They had looked at humanity's different approach to problems and seen primitive thinking. They had been wrong about all of it. Now they were paying the price for their arrogance. Humanity had walked away quietly. They had not argued. They had not fought. They had simply accepted the decision and left. But in leaving, they had taken something the council never realized it would miss. They had taken innovation. They had taken flexibility. They had taken the ability to solve problems in new ways. And now the council was discovering that those things were more valuable than all their ancient wisdom combined. 6 months had passed since the council made their decision. The evacuation was almost complete. Captain Peter Morris stood on the bridge of his cargo ship called Liberty's Call. Through the window he could see the last human research station pulling away from the big orbital platform above Centauri Prime. The station's engines glowed bright blue as it started its long trip back to human territory. Lieutenant Amy Brooks was his first officer. She looked at her screen and gave her report. That is the last one in this sector. All personnel are accounted for. All equipment has been removed or destroyed according to the rules. Peter nodded. The orders had been very clear from the start. Leave nothing behind that could be copied or used by others. If humanity was being forced out, they would take everything they had contributed, every piece of technology, every bit of knowledge, everything. Down on the planet's surface, Dr. Henry Shaw was overseeing the final shutdown of the Joint Agricultural Research Center. Centauri scientists stood around watching. They looked more worried with each passing hour. Humans were packing up machines that had cost millions. They were erasing databases full of shared research. They were getting ready to leave forever. Dr. Krellmar could not stay quiet any longer. His skin showed colors that meant he was very upset. You cannot leave now. We are so close to solving the blight problem. Your work on how proteins are structured was about to give us the breakthrough we desperately need. Henry stopped what he was doing. He was closing a large crate of genetic testing equipment. He looked at Krellmar with genuine sadness. I'm truly sorry, my friend, but the council made their position completely clear. Humans are not welcome as equal partners. I wish you the very best with your future research. Krellmar tried again. But we need... Henry interrupted him gently. You need nothing from us. That is what the council told everyone. They said our technology was not original. They said our contributions were too small to matter. I am confident you will manage perfectly well without us. The same type of situation was happening on many worlds. Human construction workers stopped building roads and bridges that were only half done. Human doctors closed medical facilities that had been treating alien patients for years. Human teachers packed up schools where they had been educating alien children. On the massive trade station called Velcor, Merchant Captain Linda Hayes stood watching as computer systems locked down the entire human business district. It happened very fast. Hundreds of stores and companies closed in a single day. Thousands of alien workers who had jobs in those businesses suddenly had no work. The station's main administrator was clearly panicking. He was an insect-like being whose antennae kept drooping lower and lower. This is complete madness. The human quarter provides 30% of our entire station's economy. 30%. Do you understand what that means? Linda just looked at him calmly. I understand perfectly. But you need to take this up with the Galactic Council. We are simply following the orders we received. Back in human space, the atmosphere was completely different. Admiral Charles Griffin was in the military command center on Earth. He stood watching the huge tactical display screen. Little dots representing ships appeared one after another as vessels returned home. Each ship was more than just metal and machinery. Each one carried knowledge, skills, and capabilities that humanity had been sharing with the galaxy for decades. He called out for a status report. Colonel Sandra Pierce was ready with the information. All civilian vessels have been accounted for, sir. Our military assets are now 93% recalled. The final Deep Space Patrol group will arrive home within the next 2 weeks. The Admiral asked his next question. And what about the special projects? Sandra's expression did not change at all. Proceeding exactly as planned, sir. The Council still has absolutely no idea what we have been working on all this time. Charles allowed himself a thin smile. Good. That is exactly how we want to keep things. The special Projects were humanity's insurance policy. While working within council space, human scientists and engineers had been quietly developing new technologies. These were advances the council knew nothing about. Humans had learned an important lesson: never depend completely on others, always have a backup plan. On a secret research station far from council territory, Dr. Karen Foster was leading a team of scientists. They were working on new types of engines that could travel much faster than anything the council had. They were developing weapons that worked on completely different principles. They were creating technologies that would give humanity an advantage if they ever needed to defend themselves. Karen looked at the test results on her screen. They were better than expected. She smiled. The council thinks we are primitive. They think our technology is just copies of theirs. They are going to get a very big surprise. Meanwhile, civilian leaders were making plans for humanity's future.
President Greg Palmer sat in a meeting with his top advisors.
They were discussing where humanity should go from here. The withdrawal from council space was nearly complete. Now they needed to decide what came next. Secretary of State Michelle Torres spread out a star map on the table. We have identified 47 star systems that are suitable for colonization. None of them are claimed by the council. None of them are even in council territory. They are all rich in resources. We could establish a completely independent network of human worlds. The president studied the map carefully. How long would it take to establish viable colonies? We could have the first colony ships launched within 3 months, Michelle answered. Full colonization of the most promising systems would take about 5 years, but we would be completely self-sufficient within 2 years. Greg nodded slowly. Do it, humanity will stand on its own. We will build our own future. And we will never again put ourselves in a position where others can tell us we are not good enough. As human ships continued to stream back home, something was becoming clear. Humanity was not running away in defeat. They were regrouping. They were preparing. They were getting ready to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of when they did not have to follow someone else's rules. Back in council space, the first signs of problems were starting to appear. Small things at first. A trade route that suddenly became less efficient. A medical facility that could not handle a disease outbreak as well as before. A mining operation that had to shut down part of its work because safety systems were not functioning properly. Nobody connected these problems to the human departure yet. The council members thought these were just random difficulties, normal problems that would be solved quickly. They still believed their own words. They had said human contributions were negligible. They had convinced themselves that losing humanity would not matter, but they were wrong, and soon, very soon, they would begin to understand just how wrong they had been. The council chamber was filled with noise. Hundreds of alien voices mixed together as translators worked hard to turn different languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador John Miller stood at the human podium. His face showed nothing as Council Speaker Vex Theron gave the final decision. The tall insect-like alien spoke with clear dislike in his voice. The human species has been found inadequate for full council membership. Your military forces are too small. Your technology is not original. Your culture is too violent. These were the words that came from Vex Theron. His mouth parts clicked as he spoke. The other council members seemed happy with this decision. Next to Miller stood Dr. Lisa Garrett. Her hands gripped her datapad so hard her knuckles turned white. She had spent 15 years building friendships with other species. She had worked so hard to show that humans deserved a place among the stars. Now it felt like all that work meant nothing. Commander Jake Patterson was also there. He was the military representative. He stood very straight and still. He had warned everyone this might happen. The council species had always looked down on humans. They thought humans were too young, too aggressive, and too hard to predict. Vex Theron continued speaking. He said that humanity's choice to keep independent military forces was seen as a threat to peace across the galaxy. The Council wanted all human ships to join the Council Defense Fleet. If humans refused, they had to leave Council space immediately. The chamber erupted with sounds of approval. The Vrelniks group seemed very pleased. The Korthan ambassador's eye stalks moved in a way that Miller had learned meant they were feeling smug and superior. Miller looked at his team. Communications Officer Ben Cooper gave a small nod. They had prepared for this possibility. They had talked about what to do if this happened. Very well. Humanity withdraws. Miller said these words quietly into the microphone. The chamber fell completely silent. This was not what they expected. Usually when this happened to a species, they would beg. They would try to negotiate. They would offer to give up things to stay. They did not simply accept and leave. Miller kept speaking. We will begin bringing back all human personnel, ships, and equipment from Council space right away. We will honor all existing trade contracts until they expire naturally. After that, we will stop all business relations with Council members. Humanity wishes the Council well in everything they do in the future. He gathered his papers. The entire human delegation stood up and walked out of the chamber. They moved in perfect order and complete silence. No one said a word. Behind them, confused voices began to spread through the council. They had expected protests. They had expected anger, maybe even threats. They did not expect simple acceptance. They did not expect humans to just walk away without a fight. None of them noticed the small smile on Commander Patterson's face as he left the chamber. He knew something they did not. Humanity had been preparing for this day. They had backup plans. They had been working on projects the Council knew nothing about. The news spread fast across human space. Every human living or working in Council territory received the same message. Pack up, come home, bring everything. Leave nothing behind. The orders were clear and simple. On space stations across the galaxy, human workers began closing their shops and offices. Human doctors started shutting down their medical clinics. Human teachers began packing up their classrooms. Human engineers stopped their work on construction projects that were only half finished. The aliens who had worked alongside humans for years watched in growing confusion. Many of them had become friends with their human co-workers. They did not understand why this was happening. Many asked their human friends to stay, but the humans had their orders. On the planet Centauri Prime, Dr. Henry Shaw supervised the closing of a major research facility. The Centauri scientists watched with alarm as humans packed expensive equipment into shipping containers. They deleted shared research files. They prepared to leave a world they had lived on for years. Dr. Krelmar was a Centauri scientist. He had worked with Dr. Shaw for 5 years. His face showed bright colors of distress. But you cannot leave. We are in the middle of solving the blight. Our southern continent is dying. Your work on protein restructuring was about to give us the answer we need. Henry stopped sealing a crate of genetic equipment. He looked at his friend. I am sorry, Krelmar. I truly am. But the Council has made its decision very clear. Humans are not welcome as equals. I hope you find success with your research, but we need your help. Krelmar started to say, You need nothing from us. Henry said these words kindly but firmly. The Council said our technology is not original. They said our contributions are too small to matter. I am sure you will do just fine without us. Similar scenes happened on dozens of worlds. Human engineers walked away from buildings that were half constructed. Human medical staff closed hospitals that served millions of aliens. Human agricultural experts left farms where they had been teaching better growing methods. On Velcor Station, a major trading hub, Merchant Captain Linda Hayes watched as machines sealed off the entire human commercial district. Hundreds of businesses closed overnight. Thousands of aliens lost their jobs. The station administrator was very upset. His antennae drooped down. This is madness. The human section provides 30% of our station's entire economy. Linda just shrugged. Take it up with the Council. We are just following our orders. Back in human space, the mood was very different. Admiral Charles Griffin stood in the war room of Fleet Command. He watched the big screen as ships came home one by one. Each vessel represented not just metal and machines. They represented knowledge and experience that humanity had shared freely with the rest of the galaxy. He called for a status report. Colonel Sandra Pierce answered. All civilian vessels are accounted for. Military assets are 93% recalled. The last deep space patrol will be home in 2 weeks. The Admiral asked about the special projects. Sandra's face stayed neutral. Everything is proceeding as planned, sir. The Council has no idea what we have been working on. Admiral Griffin smiled slightly. Good. Let's keep it that way. The Council had made a choice. They thought humans needed them more than they needed humans. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Humanity had walked away quietly. They had accepted the decision with dignity. But that quiet acceptance would soon become the loudest statement the galaxy had ever heard.